Well, good evening and happy Shabbat to one and all, and the new world order of no freedoms and no jobs, and a stunningly bleak future. It's I will say that for me here on my boat and the Virgin Islands with Asher and Leah, it's not really all that much different, because I've ever really since we got together and I stopped being distracted with dating, because I did take a few months off to experience a little freedom. Yeah, just experience a little freedom. That since that time, and we stumbled on the Nakri and Chodar related prophecies, I've taken this real serious, and I'm in this chair translating away or editing or writing commentary, average of 10 to 14 hours a day, sometimes 15 hours a day. But I'm probably averaging 10 hours a day. I'd like to say 6 days a week, but there's a lot of times where it's 7 days a week. And so if you're doing that, I can tell you that it really doesn't make a lot of difference.
Where you are,
yeah, it doesn't make a lot of difference that they won't, let me out of my house without arresting me. I don't leave. Yeah, if it wasn't for taking Asher out, to do her business and carrying the trash out, I'm not sure that, I'd have a lot of outings. So,
poor thing.
So what are you going to do? I do want to have a few items in the news. We have. I'm not saying this because I'm recommending a solution, because we're way past a time of solutions. It is just simply to provide awareness so that the family is as properly equipped to deal with what has befallen us, and so that by providing a sane voice in the midst of all of the nonsense, hopefully that there are new ears that will be listening to us and that will recognize that what we're saying makes sense, and there's not a lot of people doing that these days. The federal government is on its way this year to spending $4 trillion more than it collects in revenue. And by the way, the revenue of the federal government is taxation. It's taking revenue away from productive citizens. But it's going to spend $4 trillion more than the revenue that it confiscates from its citizens. The budget deficit is twice as large relative to the economy as any year since 1945. You know what happened in 1945, don't you?
The war ended?
World War, yeah. Well, the war ended with the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and we had just ended the war in Europe. To support such borrowing, the Federal Reserve has dropped interest rates to zero and added $2 trillion of loans to its portfolio. Now, its portfolio, it doesn't have money. It creates the illusion of money. And so it has created the illusion of money to supply $2 trillion in additional debt. And for it to say, hey, the interest rates are free, aren't we spectacular and generous? Well, they're not loaning their money, and the interest rates aren't going to stay at zero. And so the problem here is, now that we have $25 trillion worth of debt, when interest rates just reach a normalized level, on top of whatever the deficit is for a particular year, there'll be another $1 to $2 trillion worth of debt just servicing the debt. And that's without paying down any of the actual borrowing of the debt. All of this borrowing is required to plug the gaping hole caused by the politicians' reaction to the coronavirus. Unemployment now is at levels greater than we're seeing in the Great Depression. Unemployment levels are greater than in the Great Depression of 1929. And we still see politicians being unwilling to allow people to go back to work. The Senate last month approved a $2 trillion spending bill on a vote of 96 to 0. A Princeton University, and that's not exactly a bastion of conservatism, Atif Mian, an economics professor there, who has written widely on the subject, he says, we are talking about a level of debt that would be unprecedented in modern history. He says, well, let me correct that. We're talking about a level of debt that is unprecedented in human history. We are well past a tipping point. I was asked today by someone, when did we pass the point of no return as it relates to our debt? And he says, you talked back in your Shattering Myths shows and early on, some 15 to 20 years ago, you talked about having read and the information gleaned from the creature from Jekyll Island and the nature of fiat currencies and central banks. And my conclusion was that over 20 years ago, we passed the point of no return. There was no way for the U.S. to go back to an asset-based currency. And it was clear that fiat currency and the continued growth of what we perceive as democracy would ultimately destroy the country economically, as more people, more politicians would, or people would vote for politicians who would make themselves more popular by giving their constituents that which they have not earned. It's there's a term for it that is normally considered illegal unless you're in government. It's called theft and bribes. Yes. Yeah. But the government can do what you will go to jail for on theft and bribes. Total government business and household debt now exceeds 250% of gross annual output. 250%. 3/4 greater than in 1980, according to government statistics, which was the Great Recession. This year, the deficit will reach a post-war peak of 19%, according to the committee responsible for the federal budget. Only when the United States fought Nazi Germany was Washington bathed in more red ink as a percentage of gross domestic product. Professor Schlock, the chief economist at Deutsche Bank, says that interest rates are being kept artificially low by massive, and he calls it purchases, by the Fed. He says if it wasn't for the Fed creating the illusion of purchasing debt, then to solicit buyers, they would have to have an interest rate in the range probably of 5 to 10%. Which would, of course, bankrupt the country. In March, to smooth out the dysfunctional trading, the Fed began buying $75 billion worth of bonds every day. I mean, there was a period of time that $1 billion was a lot of money.
You ain't kidding.
Well, now the Fed alone is buying $75 billion worth of government bonds every day. And for them to buy it, what they're doing is they're making your currency worth less at a rate of $75 billion per day. Running the monetary printing presses, and there's no presses, it's just simply adding zeros. It's all computer. It's the illusion of money. At the behest, it's really the economics of the United States and the economics of the Western world now are based on religious faith. Running the monetary printing presses at the behest of politicians historically has been a recipe for financial crises in countries worldwide. Look what happens when you do that. And what happened to Argentina? What happened to Chile? Look what happened to every country that's made. What happened to Germany prior to war? In fact, if it wasn't for war, Germany would never have gotten out of it. You had to take wheelbarrows of money to buy a loaf of bread.
I was in Brazil, and you could go out of the hotel, and you could stop a cab driver and make more money off your dollar today than you could the day before. Every day it went up. It was just frightening. You know, I had a lot of U.S. cash, and they would just swap you. They'd beg you. Just people jump at it. It's not a way to live, believe me.
No. And that's what we are doing this deliberately. A severe recession that drove unemployment rates to 30%, which is where we are now in America, would send nearly 1/3 of mortgages into default and lead to 1.5 times as many foreclosures after the housing bubble collapsed. In a few months, the recovery will not be there, this is Piskorski said, and these households will be saddled with very high levels of debt, and they won't have jobs, and they will all start to default. We've shared this theory before, but there's another professor. This is Dr. David Katz. He's the director of Yale's Center for the Prevention and Research, Griffin Center for Research on pandemics in Connecticut. And Yale's a pretty prestigious university. He's warned that while social distancing is helping to mitigate the spread of the coronavirus, it is also preventing the development of immunity, which is needed if we're going to resume our normal lives. But that isn't the intent of politicians. They don't want us to resume normal lives. You know, even the president of France yesterday said, we will never go back to normal. The world has fundamentally changed. It changed in the blink of an eye. And it isn't going to unchange. You now have politicians like in California and Michigan that are intent on being dictators. If somebody goes to the safest place you can go with the coronavirus, like the beach, the California dictator will have you arrested.
Yeah.
You know, if you're protesting against the unconstitutional deprivation of your right to assemble, to protest, or liberty, she not only won't speak to you, she'll have you arrested. They are not going to give up this authority. Liberal politicians are giddy with this ability for the first time ever to be able to control businesses which they despise and they're envious of, and to control people's lives, which is what they thirst for. And it's happened worldwide. And the media, which is left of Mao Zedong, is drooling over this whole experience. You even have the leading environmentalists saying, isn't this a wonderful thing that the coronavirus has created? We have finally reached the point where the carbon emissions are at the level that we will slow global warming. See, we could do it, and now we are doing it. Isn't that great? It's as if people have no concept of the value of labor, the value of enterprise, the value of capital, the value of the entrepreneur, the contribution of business. And what we have learned is that when there is no business, when the only thing that exists is a dictatorial, communist, or fascist, totalitarian government, everyone loses their freedoms and they lose their prosperity, and the only thing that they can do to continue to control people is to have secret police, prisons, torturous reactions, total deprivation of speech, and ultimately they create false enemies and go to war. That's where we are.
Yeah, there's no disagreement.
The kind of world that was envisioned in the time of Jacob's troubles, to Christians known as the tribulation, was unfathomable 3 months ago. Unfathomable back in February. And now we're living it.
Yeah.
And we're not going to put this genie back into the bottle. We are not going to spend our way back into prosperity. We're in a devastating situation, both with the virus and with the economic response to it, and the giddiness of politicians having become dictators. Folks, there just is no future apart from Yah. This would be a really good time to get to know Yahweh and become part of the covenant family, because apart from him, you have nothing. You know, this Dr. David Katz of the Yale Institute was saying that, you know, in the case of some of the Asian nations who appeared to stop the spread with lockdown-style mitigation strategies, they only saw it increase again when the restrictions were relaxed. And that's what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. If you lock everybody up today, everybody else will wait until things get better, and you let them out into the world, and guess what? They'll get infected. And you accomplish nothing but imposing draconian constraints on freedom and destroying the economy. All you're doing when you flatten the curve is you're changing the dates. Now, I understand that there are like Oxford is touting that they're going to have a vaccine ready to produce by December, and the first part of the year they'll have 100 million doses of it. But if you read what they're doing, they're taking a vaccine that they developed a couple of years ago to combat Ebola. Mm-hmm. And they modified it ever so slightly to deal with SARS and MERS. And that's what they're testing in monkeys. That's a far cry from creating a vaccine that is actually devoted to COVID-19, although COVID-19 does have Ebola laced into it, and it's a variation of SARS and MERS. Yes. And let's just say that they come up with one. Let's say the Israelis, who are close, come up with one. Let's say the Americans, who Trump has now said you have as much money as you want. We don't even care how much money you spend. Total open checkbook to develop a vaccine. Let's say the United States comes up with one too. I am pro-vaccine. I realize that the benefits of vaccines outweigh the negative consequence of vaccines in the range of 100,000 to 1, maybe even 200,000 or 300,000 to 1. And I realize that, you know, occasionally a vaccine has a negative influence on some people, and you know, one in about 300,000 or 400,000 vaccines has a dramatically negative influence on people. But for the most part, of the 99.99% of people take vaccines have a tremendous life-saving benefit from them. That said, the Chinese are developing a vaccine too. Would you take it?
No.
No. I wouldn't even think about it. I'm not sure I'd want to take a vaccine that hadn't been proven over a test of time. I just think that there's way too much risk in some of the stuff. Now, I understand that a vaccine works by putting in a dead version of the virus so that your body develops antibodies for it. But we're not even positive that the antibodies will make you immune from this virus. And, you know, you have to be really careful when you're dealing with a virus, because viruses are not technically alive anyway. Now, there's a real debate whether a virus is even a life form.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A virus cannot self-replicate. All life has the ability to propagate itself. Viruses cannot. Viruses are parasites. They require devouring a host. And so that's why, the bubonic, well, not bubonic plague, that was a bacterial thing, but most things like HIV, the things that have been Ebola, the things that are the most deadly are viruses. But they require a host to replicate, which is why immunity is typically an essential thing. But we don't have to worry. Bill Gates recently came out and he defended the Chinese government's response to the corona pandemic, arguing that they did a lot of things right at the beginning. And as for America's response to the virus, he says it was particularly poor. Well, the fact is, Bill, I don't know what your contribution to the world is, because you and Paul essentially stole under false pretenses, the operating system that became Windows, and then you lucked into a deal with IBM, and then were particularly effective at creating monopolies, and then abused people once you had them. But Bill, the bottom line is here that this coronavirus is because the Chinese were conducting research that they should not have been doing. It was dangerous what they were doing. They had a lab accident, and people were infected. And then they did everything they could to lie about it. They essentially took away people's lives. They actually nailed and screwed and locked people inside of their homes, where they couldn't even leave their homes. They couldn't get food. If there was a fire, they would die. Anybody that said anything against the government was taken away and killed. They lied about the timing of the virus, which took place months before they reported it. They've lied about the scope of the virus. They've lied about where the virus began. They have precluded researchers to study the virus. There is nothing more that they could have done that would have been counterproductive to the world than they have already done. They pegged the far end of the scale in terms of pure, adulterated, and murderous evil, Bill. And that's disgusting.
He wants you to trust him now.
Oh,
like Paul, he lied a little bit, so why not trust him? I don't think so.
Yeah, it's like Jews with Rabbi Akiba. I start with a false Messiah, and of course that got that was the cause of the diaspora. That was the cause of having the land assaulted. That's the cause of having it renamed Palestine. That's the cause of Jews being hauled off to Europe as slaves and being tortured to death by the hundreds of thousands, all on a false Messiah. But you ought to trust me. I'm going to be the father of your religion.
And he is. God.
And he is to this day. It's just, and all those little Jews that are bobbing their heads, wearing their morning jackets and little curly Q hair down the sides, and their black hats bobbing up and down at the Western Wall, or in the state of New York, where they just love to congregate together, not working, on the dole, living a religious life, abusing women, giving women no rights, precluding everyone from having access to any contemporary source of information, spending their entire time being disgustingly religious. What in the hell is wrong with them? What an absolute and total waste of a life. And it's worse than that, because when they give lip service to a Torah, which they're actually Talmud observant, they give lip service to the feast of Yahowah, though they don't call him by name, and they throw in their own mix like Purim and Hanukkah and Rosh Hashanah, and they don't celebrate a single one of them in accordance with God's instructions. You should go to a rabbinical Seder, and you're going to leave hungry. I'm going to tell you. And the one thing you're not going to get enough of to even know what it tastes like is lamb. But you'll have all sorts of other religious little artifacts on your table. No, they've done more harm to Yahweh's reputation and to the credibility of his Torah than all of the religious people combined. So we are in a terrible fix. There is only one solution. It is Yahowah. Now, this isn't the first time the world has faced a deadly pandemic. I want to return to Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 118. Around the 17th statement is where we're going to pick it up. I think we shared a little bit of this last week. It reads,
Last week. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I shall not experience a prolonged death. Instead, now that's pretty cool when you consider, the world is besieged by this deadly virus, and people are terrified of dying. But what does Dowd say? I'm not going to experience a prolonged death. It's a blink of an eye for me. Instead, I will continue to live. And I'm going to do so that I can recount, record, and relate the work of Yah. That was what he was committed to doing. Yahowah teaches and instructs me, even corrects me. So he will not give me over to the approach of the plague of death regarding the pandemic disease that is killing many people. That's why it does not bother me. I don't lose any sleep over corona. And I also realize that it is our role in life to be open to Yahweh's teaching, but not selfishly. I mean, to learn is a wonderful endeavor, but to learn, and I have this conversation a lot. To learn just for the sake of learning, because you're thirsty for information, because you want to know, is selfish, unless you do as Dowd did, which is you learn to teach.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that if you learn to teach, not only does it give your learning purpose, it hugely enhances your understanding. Because to teach, the preparation and the thought process that goes into teaching requires you to go beyond just knowing the material, but to having that material permeate who you are.
Yeah.
Making the connections to the church. You have to own it. So Yah teaches and instructs me, even corrects me, and he will not give me over to the approach of the plague of death. I like being corrected. I have to tell you that I'm in a project that I never thought I would do again, but here we are. We've just finished Coming Home of volumes 1 and 2, and they're both long. They're both about 650, 60 pages long. So these are serious books called Coming Home volumes 1 and 2, and they are within days of going to Amazon to be printed, and Yoel Joe, our good friend, is working to put them online. But we learned so much in writing Coming Home that we realized we've got some work to do to clean up, make some corrections, because Yahweh corrected us. Make some corrections on observations. And so observations was comprised of 2 volumes, and now it's 4. We've made some corrections and some enhancements to observations. Now, it's not really double the size. I did change our formatting so that we could have a reasonable size font in the books. Alan has done a marvelous job of getting these books ready for publication. And previously, what he tried to do was to get as much information packed into one volume so that it could be purchased at the minimal amount of money that was possible. So it was like, an extraordinary value, except, you need to have glasses and a magnifying glass to read it. The font got to be really small. And I'm a believer that the written word is majestic. It has a splendor and a wonder to it. It's inspiring, and I want the written word to breathe. That's why I like amplification, but I want it to look beautiful. And so, I came up with a style for our writing of a very classic font and italics and bold to present Yahweh's testimony, and then a format of indentation and paragraph separation, and just a style of delivering it, such that the words could be celebrated. Because I think Yahweh wants us to have this wondrous approach to words, to love words, to cherish what we can learn from words, what words can teach us. So part of what we've done is we've narrowed the margins, and we've set it up so that it's stately and elegant in these books. And that means that it takes more pages to present the same amount of information, but it's presented in a much more credible, approachable, readable, comfortable way. And so, but it's true. They are. It's now 4 volumes for observations, and we were moving along splendidly, making great progress. We have a whole team now that is editing them, and I'm really grateful for the devotion of our edit team. And I did get sidetracked because the last chapter of Volume 3 took me a full week, because it was so good. Even it's one of the things that I'm constantly amazed as to how insightful Yahweh's Spirit and words have made what we have discovered. And there's so many wonderful, rich, insightful things. And yet, every 3 or 4 pages, there was an overstatement about Yosha, for example, or a missed opportunity to speak about Dowd. And occasionally there was a citation from the book of Matthew. And so we're going back and removing that. And then I also want to make these books more pertinent to Yehudim, to Jews. And so we're being a little more open to the idea of, if something can be criticized within Judaism, we want to have Jews feel really comfortable. And no, actually what there is of the 80% of Jews who are secular Jews now, they realize that the rabbis are full of crap. And so when you can specifically say, this is what they say and how false it is, it actually gives a lot of credibility to Jews to take the risk, and it's a much bigger risk in their community than it is in the Christian community. When I left Christianity, sure, you're called inspired by Satan, and they give you a really hard time, but it's nothing compared to being a Jew. A Jew who leaves and speaks against the rabbis is slandered and hounded and harassed, and they're vicious about it. So to have ammunitions to come back at them and say, how do you deal with this idiot? I mean, just like Akiba as we began the program. Why are you involved in a religion when the founder of your religion was wrong about everything and has caused our people more harm than anybody? I mean, Akiba has done more harm to Jews than Muhammad and Adolf Hitler and Paul combined.
Yeah,
so why would you follow a religion that he founded? Well, so that's what we're attempting to do, and we're now I'm adding a number of translations to the 4th chapter of Volume 4 of Observations. So it's taking a little bit more time, but boy, there was some good stuff, and I learned there was so much, like that whole bit. I don't know if you ever even recall this, but when we first came upon the Choder text, because we were just translating Yashayah from beginning to somewhere around chapter 20 or 21, 22, and we came to chapter 11, and chapter 11 begins with the Choder. At the time, I didn't realize the entire chapter was on the Choder, but now we do. And so I was writing about the Choder, and I said, well, there's one other reference to the Choder. It happens to be in a mashal, word picture, and it's in the 14th proverb. And so I went there and I said, well, this must be an evil reference to the Choder, so there must be a bad Choder out there. Choder means insignificant, damn implement. Well, I've gone back and I've looked at it and said, no, wait a minute. There's no verb in and I think it is Mashal 14:3. There's no verb, and the word that was being used negatively is actually used most frequently positively, and it speaks of divine attributes, godly attributes. So, maybe I just really missed this and went back and realized that where it begins in the mouth, ba-te, is actually against the mouth, against the verbiage, pawn, and to be someone who is ceasing to thwart the verbiage of those who are evil. And evil is actually a term in Hebrew that speaks about corrupt government and perverted leaders within a society. And the Towrah is presented as being against the diatribes of these people and actually agitating them. And then what I found out is that the entire proverb is Dowd explaining how to do the job of a Towrah. What it means to be a truthful witness, how you avoid being a false witness. It's Dowd saying, okay, I know I happen to be the big branch, and this Towrah is going to come along, and he's going to reveal, make prevalent again some of the things I say. It's not the sharpest tool around, and he happens to be a lowly goyim. So I'm going to try to help him out. I'm going to try to help him out here and give him, we'll call it Towrahdom 101. Towrahdom for freshmen.
Very good.
So I find myself translating it, and every word of it is a treasure. So sometimes the rewrites take more time than you might think, but the whole plan is, we talk about he instructs us, Yah instructs us, he corrects us, is that, at times you got to go back over your work and update it and correct it. And once we finish with observations, we're going to do Yada Yah. And then once we do Yada Yah, we'll do Introduction to God. Once we do Introduction to God, we'll do Questioning Paul. And we have a new theme. Everything is white, gold, and blue. So everything is very clean. It's the same straightforward theme, same font, same print, same format, same everything. And we're going to take that same format into the website, so it's one consistent look throughout.
Wow, what a lot of work.
So it is, but we've got a good team doing it, and we're what else do we have to do? And that's Leia's laughing in the background because I am really a lot of fun to be around, because I come up here at 6 in the morning, and I typically leave here at about 8 at night, and she brings up food. And other than taking Asher for to do her business, that is my life. Fortunately, she loves this stuff too, so she is not bothered by the fact that I'm, at least outwardly, that I'm doing this. But if we don't do it, who else is going to do it? And
nobody.
So what? So let's just say that I give up 70% of my time for the last 30 years of my life. First of all, it's a blessing. It's fun.
Yeah.
I'm not suffering. I'm having a great time. And what if one person's life over that short a period of time can be used by Yah to increase the size of his eternal family?
That's big stuff.
So
really,
it's a course worthwhile doing. It's the most sensible trade-off ever. Dowd then says, this is Psalm 118:19. He says, "Open for me the doorway of being right, such that I might enter it. I want to make a public confession to Yah. The doorway to God's home is the doorway of being right. It's the doorway of Passover, the doorway of life. Only one door. There isn't. St. Peter is not there with the key. The Catholic Church most certainly doesn't have the key. The doorway is Passover. His home has one door. There's one path to it. You've got to partake in Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim to become part of Yah's family, and then to be enriched and empowered on Shabuah. And those things will get you into God's home. There's still more to do. You know, Teruah is what we do. Teruah is our purpose.
Shout out. Yeah.
Yeah, shout out, a warning, and to share Yah's message with all who will listen. And there is no more important part of Teruah than Kippurim, which is the reconciliation of Yisrael and Yehudah with Yahowah. And that's the purpose of Kippurim, which leads to the entire family camping out with Yahowah for all eternity, Sukkah. So it's the doorway of being right. God's access to God is not based upon being good, donations, faith, a good heart. It's based entirely on being right.
So let's be right. Yeah.
So let's be right. It's not hard to be right. This doorway of Yahweh, this is the doorway of Yahweh, is what Dowd wrote. This is, so the doorway of being right and of expressing one's gratitude to Yah is the doorway of Yah. Those who are right shall enter through it. Sadak, 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 Sadak. And if you got a different approach than that,
you're wrong.
Your approach, is wrong. God says that the doorway to my home is opened to those who are right. Now, there hadn't been a lot of people right. You know, when Yahshua was invited to heaven and Yahweh threw open the door while they were beginning their conversation, and Yahshua turned around and there was nobody there, not a single person waiting outside the door to be let in. No, he was devastated. And yet here was the greatest prophet of all time. You know, Moshe is called the greatest of the prophet, but that's the greatest of prophet only in the sense that he met with Yahweh face to face, and that he performed the miracles that Yahweh used to free his people from Yisrael, from Mitzrayim, and then Yahweh shared the Torah with him. And so Moshe's role is exceedingly important for a lot of reasons. I mean, he was the last person that anyone who is religious or political would have picked, which is precisely why Yahweh picked him. But you know, the fact of the matter is that we are in a position where the guy who embodies what is right, well, I think my dog just knocked something over, but it's not the end of the world. We'll figure out what that is tomorrow. But nonetheless, what he has told us is that the thing that is important is to be right. And if you want to be right, read the Torah. You want to be right, concur with Yahweh. Those who are right will enter through it. He then says, I will want to express what I have come to know, acknowledging my appreciation to you because you answered me. You have become the source of my deliverance and my freedom. So, this first word is yada. Y deleth, yod deleth, hey. So it's a little different than just the yada that we are most familiar with. It's the feminine form, and it is Yod Deleth He, based on the same verb, yada, to know. And it conveys the idea of not just knowing, not just acknowledging, but appreciating, admiring. So it's coming to know and admire, to understand and respect Yahweh is what yada means. To you, because you answered me. Yahweh's long on answers. And he answered Dowd because Dowd's approach was right. Dowd didn't sit there and say, boy, will you help me win the lottery? Will you help me get a good grade on the test? Will you help me get a date with a pretty girl? Dowd's requests were not mundane. Dowd wanted what Yahweh wanted. Dowd took the time to become an expert in Yahweh's Torah, which would qualify him to write the 119th Psalm. And the better Dowd came to know Yahweh, the more expressive he was about Yahweh, telling us who Yahweh is, what he's offering, and what he expects in return. So naturally, Yahweh answered Dowd. And because Yahweh provided these answers to Dowd through the Torah, through the set-apart spirit, Dowd expressed his gratitude. You have become the source of my deliverance and freedom. La'ane la Yeshua. We've talked a lot about Yasha and its various forms. Yeshua is how it's pronounced in this particular case. But whether it's Yasha or Yeshua, the term means to free, to deliver, to liberate, to secure from harm's way. And a derivative of liberating someone, of freeing someone, of delivering them from harm's way is to save them. You know, if you have a friend and they are being kidnapped, and you go in and you rescue them, yes, you've saved that individual.
Yes, indeed.
And but the saving them was a byproduct of you liberating them and delivering them from harm's way. That's what God's saying, and it's so important to us to understand that, because salvation is being delivered from religion and government.
You know what else I found on that word? I looked it up last night because at the end of the show, maybe I can ask you something that without getting you offline here. But it also means to sukkah. And I thought that was very interesting. It's used to sukkah is the ultimate goal where we settle down with Yah. And it's just like, wow, of course it's freedom, but it's freedom in Yah, with Yah. And it's like, wow. It's got,
that's the other part of it that most people don't have an appreciation of, is because the Lord and religion seeks obedience.
Don't allow that.
And to be obedient is to be the antithesis of free. If you obey, you don't have freedom. And so Yahweh wants us to appreciate the fact that he is a liberator, that he constantly says that he is the one that brought the children of Israel out of bondage and slavery in the crucibles of Mitzrayim, of Egypt. And so Yahweh's goal is to liberate us, to free us, not to lord over us, which means the religious approach with all of their rules to obey and a God that one has to submit to is the opposite of the real God. And when we are liberated, then we are free to choose who we associate with, what we choose to read, what we choose to think about, what we choose to do with our time. And so it's a really important concept. Well, we have all chosen well. And we have been rewarded. We have been rewarded for it. But it is a choice. You know, there is yeah, I would have a different requirement or a different response if I were being somehow cajoled or ordered to crawl out of bed in the morning and come up here and sit 10 to 12 hours in front of a computer translating and writing. But instead of that, I look at it as I have an opportunity. I can't wait to see what I learned today and how what I learn can provide insights that can be shared and make a difference in everyone's life. So it's, but we're free to do that. This now says something that is was brought to my attention. One of the reasons that I jumped way ahead in time and began to translate the 118th Mizmor. One of the members of the edit team said as they were reviewing what we read early on in To Dowd or Not to Dowd about in the book of Matthew, there's this ridiculous story about a farmer and the tenants and how the tenants are allegedly Jews and they harass all of the workers and kill them, and then they killed the owner of the vineyard's son, thinking that if they kill the owner of the vineyard's son, that the owner will give them the inheritance, give the murderers the inheritance that he would have otherwise have given his son. And then the Christian Jesus has the audience contribute to their scripture by completing this parable in a nonsensical way, all because Paul's influence over the Christian New Testament. He had to make it anti-Semitic, otherwise how do you support replacement theology? And then it concludes, so that you have this whole metaphor over parable over a vineyard and killing, and it ends with a statement that just is so incongruous. It's the stone, that the builders rejected turned out to be the cornerstone, and you're saying, huh? So it was Christians again trying to take a statement that applied to Dowd, remove it from its context, remove all references to Dowd, and apply it to the Christian Jesus, so that somehow, some way, they can
claim it for the church.
Give credibility to the man that they turned into to being a god. It's just ridiculous. So this is what Psalm 118:22 says: "The stone, those who have built the edifice have spurned and rejected, has become the primary and most important cornerstone and leader." So what is the stone, the cornerstone of Yahweh's plan for humankind?
The mitzvah.
Yeah, well, the cornerstone. Now we're talking about an individual.
I say Dowd in this. So.
Yeah, Dowd. Yeah, Dowd. Dowd is the stone that is the center stone, the cornerstone of Yahweh's covenant and plan for humanity.
It's the key that opens everything.
And Dowd was not allowed to build the temple because he was a man of war. Mm-hmm. Didn't Dowd lay the cornerstone of the temple?
Oh yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here you have the stone that those who have built the edifice have spurned and rejected. The edifice is the religious edifice, and Dowd is the person that has been spurned and rejected. He's even been rejected and spurned by rabbis. So, he's pretty universally, spurned. Yeah. And somebody would say, well, how does Christians spurn Dowd? Well, do you ever hear them calling Dowd the Messiah?
Yeah, no.
But they gave that title to Jesus, didn't they? But does God ever once, does God or Jesus ever once claim that Jesus is the Messiah?
Never.
Nope.
Not once. God says that my son is Dowd, and I am his father. Does Jesus claim to be the Son of God, or does he claim to be the Son of Man?
Son of Man.
But what do Christians do? Do you ever hear a Christian say that Dowd is the Son of God?
No. Nope.
No, but they claim that it's of Jesus
Son of God
all the time, don't
Jesus.
they? Who do they claim is the person that's going to be part of a second coming?
Jesus.
But according to God, it's Dowd.
That's right.
Who do they claim is the King of Kings?
Jesus.
But who does
King,
God
Lord
say it
of
is?
Lords, too.
Yeah. They claim
Dowd.
that Jesus is the great shepherd. But what does God claim? Who's he claiming?
Where did he
shepherd?
shepherd? There's only
The
one
shepherd,
great
yeah.
shepherd.
Well, when God says, I've chosen a person to shepherd my people, who's that person?
It's always Dowd.
Yeah. When Christians say that unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Almighty God, and they completely mistranslate that prophecy, who do they say it belongs to, that it pertains to?
Jesus. They always give it to Jesus.
Yeah, they claim it belongs to Jesus, right? And yet, whose name is in the middle of it?
Dowd. We covered it.
And who's it speaking of? Speaking of Dowd. So, I mean, you couldn't be more blatant and denying, spurning, and rejecting the cornerstone of God's plan, Dowd.
Yeah.
And he is the cornerstone. He's the primary leader. And yet, they've even given that to Jesus. Remember, this thing ends by saying, but when the tenants saw the son, they said to each other, he is the heir. Come, let's kill him and take his inheritance. So they took him and they threw him out of the vineyard and they killed him. Therefore, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what shall he do to these tenants? The Jews say, well, he'll bring those wretches to a wretched end, they replied, and he will rent the vineyard to other tenants, and who will give him the share of the crop at the harvest time. And Jebus said to them, have you ever read in the scriptures, the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone? The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes. I mean,
beg your pardon?
What? You're going from a ridiculous and just ludicrous story about murder and vineyards, and then you're talking about stones and cornerstones and builders. Man, I would want my God to be smarter than that, personally. But, what the heck. I'd want my God to be bigger than a man, by the way, too. And I'd want it such that those dastardly Jews couldn't kill my God. And if the Jews did kill my God, I might want to worship the Jews.
You might want to rethink your God. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to rethink my God. I'm not really fond of the idea of worshiping a dead God on a stick. That just doesn't trip my trigger. And I can't imagine how that would make God feel. Let's see what we're going to do. Parade around this image of a dead God on a stick. That ought to really make our God feel. And if we don't show him as the dead God on a stick, let's show him as a baby in his mommy's arms, and let's call his mommy the Queen of Heaven and the Mother of God, because that was the term that was used from Astarte. And if we do that, we can just go ahead and incorporate Easter right into our religious calendar.
Yeah, make everybody happy.
Oh, and then why don't we just throw in Christmas too at the winter solstice, because that would also be part of the same pagan myth. And then the next thing that makes perfect sense is that we should go immediately to a Trinity, because that would just complete the whole Babylonian cycle.
Yeah.
So, since God hasn't taken anything away from his people and cannot know this fact that story ends by saying, therefore I tell you the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people who will produce its fruit. Anyone who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces, and anyone on whom it falls will be crushed. This is the Roman Catholic Church trying to claim that that replacement theology is very real, and that they are now the beneficiaries, and that the Jews ought to be tormented. They're scumbags, and we can even perpetrate a Holocaust, and it's all good with God.
All good. Yeah.
Yep. And of course, the chief priests they had to be turned into scoundrels. So the book of Matthew says, when the chief priests and the Pharisees heard Jesus' parables, they knew he was talking about them. Now, last time I checked, they had Jebus had asked the dreaded Jews to augment his story. So this line doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And they looked for a way to arrest him, but they were afraid of the crowd, because the people held that he was a prophet. Well, at that point, I don't think he had made a single prophecy.
It gets kind of ludicrous after a while, doesn't it?
It certainly is. But the people obviously didn't hold that he was the Son of God. They didn't hold that he was the Messiah. They weren't buying any of that, were they?
Mm-mm.
So, what we have here is the psalm about Dowd says, the stone those who have built the edifice have spurned, rejected, and limited their association with, showing disregard for the merit of the information attributed to him, has become, was, and will be the primary and most important cornerstone and leader, the fulcrum upon which everything pivots.
How marvelous.
Yeah, and how marvelous. And it's as it should be, because the closer you make Yosha to divine, and let's say that Yosha had Yahweh's soul. Now, Yahweh's soul, we've talked about this, and Yosha is a big deal from our perspective, not from God's perspective. Our soul is the substance of who we are. Without our soul, we're nothing. Yahweh without his soul is still the entirety of God. Yahweh's soul is more like a probe that we would use to extend our reach. But let's say that Yahweh gave Yosha his soul, and then he set his spirit upon them. That all of that would make Yosha, more than your ordinary guy, even though he was not called the Son of God nor the Messiah, and he's certainly not the King of Kings, and he's not coming back. He served as the Passover lamb; that was his role. But think of it from God's point of view. Would you create the universe for the Passover lamb?
No.
Would you create the universe for the opportunity to suffer as the Passover lamb and the embodiment of matzah in Sheol?
Hardly. Not without a reason.
Would you anoint a tiny aspect of yourself and then celebrate anointing a tiny aspect of yourself? If you could have mini me, JB, you have mini me, you got yourself, but you got mini me. Would you have the world acknowledge mini me as you?
No.
Not ever. So this notion that God would somehow celebrate the status of mini me, that he would anoint mini me, that he would have the second coming of mini me, that any of these things are just ludicrous. But yet, if you created the universe, you've got to have a reason for it. According to God, the story is that the reason he wanted to create the universe is because he wanted to experience what it'd be like to have a family and have his children, though, actually choose to be with him. And so that he could do all the things that make the existence of parents so wonderful and family so wonderful. We have things that you can share and things that you can teach and things you can explore and learn together, and camping out together and playing together and exploring together and learning together. I was talking today to, I do when I go out, take my dog for a walk, I have the opportunity to chit-chat with all the other people that live aboard the boats here, and there's some really, really nice people. And two of them in particular we had long talks with today, and they were extremely devoted to teaching their children, to helping their children develop character and good judgment. And we talked about those things today, and that is one of the great joys in life. And so, from Yahweh's perspective, why wouldn't he celebrate the best relationship he ever had? Yahweh found an exceedingly brilliant individual who was passionate about him, who was loved to learn, who loved to teach, who trusted and relied, who was yet dependable himself. God found what he sought as a son in Dowd, a man's man, willing to be courageous and bold, willing to defend his people, and yet to be what we would call a Renaissance man, that, you know, he was a fighter and a lover. He was a poet, and yet a king. Yeah. And so you can see why God would celebrate this life. Dowd is the very purpose of creation. And so, of course, God's going to say, he's my shepherd. He's my chosen one. He's my anointed Messiah. He's my king. I'm coming back with him. He's the shepherd of my people. That's why. He's the cornerstone. That's why we're going back and rewriting so many of the earlier books. I just didn't know it.
Change the perspective, yeah.
Yes.
We didn't know. Yeah. We didn't know.
It fundamentally changes your perspective. And that fundamental change is so essential because of two reasons. The first of those is when you understand, well, I could say three reasons. First of all, when you just understand that God celebrated this relationship more than any other, you realize father-son, father-child, the mother, set apart spirit, came upon him and never left him very early in his life. That is what this is all about. It's a celebration of family, enjoyment of family. The next thing you realize is that the one thing that separated this man from all others is his brilliance. Not only his understanding of the things of Yah, but how articulate he was in sharing the things of Yah. He was a great student and a great teacher.
That goes back to what you started the show with. I mean, he had everything. I mean, this guy's got it all. And he spends all of his time telling us how to become one of his brothers.
Yes.
I mean, wow.
Yes. He is inheriting everything God has to give, and the first thing that he wants to do is share it.
Yeah. What a guy.
What a guy. And yet he was flawed. The story is real. What the third thing that Dowd teaches us is that the Torah exists to perfect the imperfect. And that Dowd is considered right and thus vindicated because of his understanding and his response to God, not because he was good. Because at times he was really bad. And what that does is it causes us to totally relax, to enjoy our lives, that God's not sitting here as a cosmic killjoy. The puritanical nature of Islam, well, excusing the pedophilia and rape, and sex slaves, and all that sort of thing. But and of Christianity with this puritanical, well, you can't even look at a woman with lust in your eyes, and you can't have any canoodling prior to marriage, and you can't do that or you're going to be blind. It's just, oh my God, stop it already. What do you think that God was? Okay, what I'm going to do here, guys. I'm going to create the most enticing creature that you can even imagine. And I'm going to give her some features. In fact, if I gave you these features, you'd never stop playing with yourself all day long. So I'm going to give them to her. and then I'm going to tell you, no touchy. No touchy, no lucky. Ha, ha, ha. Come on, guys. You think that God created this whole process as to how we would get together and love one another because he just wanted to torture us? Oh, goodness gracious. So, lighten up. Look at Dowd. How many wives did Dowd have? 7.
20.
And 7 wives wasn't enough for this lover boy. He had 10 concubines on top of that. He was a lover.
Yeah.
Dowd loved the ladies. The ladies loved Dowd. I'm sure. God doesn't say he was. Well, there's some places it says he was beautiful, but he wasn't the tall, dark, handsome type that King Saul was.
He wasn't the best looking of his family either.
No,
he
wasn't.
Yeah.
No, he wasn't.
Yeah.
But God loved him, and he had manly characteristics. It's one of my pet peeves as I look at the religious dress up of Orthodox Jews. And they got their little feminine curly cues, and they're really effeminate looking. You can tell they've never worked a day in their life. They just don't. They don't work. And when a man doesn't work, and when he spends all of his time in religious dress up with his little curly cues, he looks so effeminate. It's just like no backbone, no substance. And that's exactly the opposite of Dowd. And Dowd was a man's man, and he fought the battles. He loved the women. He engaged in life. He wrote the songs. Oh my goodness! Here was a guy too. He's passionate. Here was a guy who the king of his country wanted to kill. And on 2 occasions, Dowd manages to
sneak in,
come right up behind him. Just Dowd and Saul, and he has the ability to kill the man who is trying to kill him. And Dowd says, "No, I'm not going to touch you. I'm not going to kill you. I would prefer it if you'd stop hunting me down and trying to kill me. I've got nothing against you. I am not going to kill you. I'm not going to harm you. But listen, you got to know, I'm not trying to harm you, and this should serve as proof." But of course, Saul was demon possessed, and he continued to pursue him. But that's there's not a lot of people who would be hunted down by a king, and when they're given the opportunity to stop that individual and kill them, I say, "No, I'm just here to talk to you. I'm going to use my words." It's just an extraordinary life.
Human being,
yeah. For with Yahweh, such things are amazing and wonderful in our eyes. What is he talking about? What's such things? Well, it's about the stone, and how the edifice that has become religion has spurned and rejected this stone, this cornerstone, and yet how Yahweh was saying, no, I'm going to say it to you that the man that laid the cornerstone of my house, my son, my Messiah, well, he's going to become the single most important cornerstone and the leader, the fulcrum upon which everything pivots. Don't recognize it, and Dowd said, with Yahweh, such things are amazing and wonderful in our sight. This is the day Yahweh has acted and engaged. Let us choose to rejoice and be elated during it. That is the right call. It's back to what we do. I think there should be an appreciation that we're passionate about this. We enjoy this. This is fun. A relationship with God is enjoyable. God is not the cosmic killjoy. He is lighthearted. He's exceedingly humble, easy to be around, uplifting. God presented himself as Dowd's Ezra, his helper. And
amazing.
That's his desire. He wants to help us. He wants to uplift us. He wants to raise us as his children. It's marvelous and in every possible way. That really brings us to the end of this particular psalm, and from there, in the chapter that we are in, we went through and we did a really interesting review of Dr. Yah's testimony, as he shared with us specifically how you would deal with a pandemic disease, and it puts us in a position where we can, at this point, go to wherever we think we should go. And I want to make a recommendation. And I'm open to suggestion, but it's my thinking that God directed us to something that is really profound. And I've recently had the opportunity to retranslate it after translating it about 3 years ago. And happens to be the next thing that I shared as I was writing. I want to go to it now. And if you want to follow along, it's for those that have the new copies of Coming Home. This is Coming Home, Volume 2, Chapter 13. It's called Stand Out and Be Noticed. And I've been on page 6 of that chapter. It begins by saying, a relatively insignificant implement, a stem, a shoot, a secondary branch, a slender twig, a sprout, a pliable wooden instrument, a secondary source of growth, serving as a living entity, delivering a prodigy, an observant individual who is willing to listen and who is committed to thinking while collecting the things Yahweh values, will be extended. Yatsa. It's a term that Yahweh uses a lot, Yatsa. Will be brought forth to serve. By means of the stalk, the giza, the stump, the root, that from which new growth emerges, the source that is the very core of the tree, of Yishe. And the primary meaning of Yishe is to stand out and be noticed, which is something God wants us to do. Stand out and be noticed. Draw attention to the substance of existence. You're not drawing attention to yourself. You're drawing attention to Dowd, to the Torah, to the covenant, to the Mikre, to these words. To draw attention to the substance of existence. As an observant branch, a netzar, a secondary stem or shoot which extends from the primary limb. From netzar, which means to observe, to watch over, and persevere. To closely look after, focus on, and protect. By means of his roots, that which keeps him anchored, steadfast, and nourished, his base and foundation, such that he will continually bear an abundance of fruit, being productive while encouraging productivity in others. Parah. He will consistently be faithful while causing and enabling fruitfulness on behalf of successive generations. So this was written, and it's the opening line of Yashayah, Isaiah 11:1. And what we're going to find is the entire chapter is a explanation of, a celebration of, an introduction to a choder. And while choder is, and all of the terminology is masculine singular, this is a common practice for Yahowah to describe the things that are directed toward him, those walking the path to him, those engaging in the covenant, are so few that they're almost always presented in the masculine singular, while things like evil, which we transliterate as evil, speak of wholesale government malfeasance and the corruption of an entire citizenry. So going astray is almost always in the plural. Mm-hmm. And doing the right things for the right reason and engaging with God and being about his business is always in the singular. So that is something that is we need to consider here. So it could well be that this depiction of this choder, this insignificant stem, speaks of a number of people that just happen to be among the few that are about God's business, and that we should all seek to be about the same task and be empowered the same way. What he has to say about the use of the choder is really uplifting and positive and worthwhile, helpful, and the more of that, the better. Mm-hmm. So if there can be 5 choders or 15 choders or 50 choders or 200 or 2,000, so much the better. But this relatively insignificant implement, this small stem off the secondary branch off the main branch, this implement is a choder. And it is being extended by the means of the stalk of Yitzhak. One of the things I didn't know, and that means to stand out and be noticed, is that I've always considered the term sucker to be a derogatory term.
We use it that way.
Yeah, we use it that way, sucker.
Yeah.
Do you know, when it comes to the single most important stump and tree in Israel, that would unquestionably be the olive, right?
Olive tree, certainly.
When it comes to olive trees, do you know that suckers are productive? Do you know that one of the ways that olive trees replicate themselves and grow is suckers that come up from the roots? And that even when you're grafting onto a limb of an old tree to create new growth, suckers are productive. So, in the case of an olive, to be a sucker, that's what we want to define choder, is a good thing, not a bad thing. And they literally come out of the stalk of a tree. An olive tree, when cut down, will have these suckers grow out of the stump, a choder. And it says that they're an observant branch. Netzer is a extremely important term. Now, one of the things that is, of course, really stupid about Netzer is that it's the basis for Nazareth. And according to the book of Matthew, in 2 places, he was Jesus of Nazareth. And of course, the problem with that is that Nazareth wouldn't exist as a town or community in Israel till the third, early 4th century. Saying he was Jesus of Nazareth, which the book of Matthew does, all that does is that it proves that section of Matthew was written in the early 4th century. And that it shouldn't be trusted because he couldn't be. But Netzer is an important term. Dowd is the shamak, which is the main branch off the main tree of lives. Dowd is that branch. He's the shamak. He's called the branch all the time. Shamak is a really big, important, key branch. And to a significant extent, Yosha grew off of that branch. He came from that branch, from Dowd's branch. A prophecy predicts that he would come from that Dowd's branch. A Netzar is a smaller branch than a Shemach, and a Choder is a smaller branch still. But Netzar, being used in conjunction with the Choder definition, is an important term because it doesn't just mean branch. Its roots suggest that its primary definition is to be observant. So it gives us tremendous insight as to what God is trying to do with this individual, or how this individual will prevail. By means of his roots, that which keeps him anchored, steadfast, and nourished. That's why one of the reasons Yahweh uses the olive tree. You know, the olive tree is the longest-lived tree in that region of the world, in the Promised Land. It produces olives, which are the source of light and the source of anointing oil. Healing. For healing and nourishing. And so the olive and the light burned on that oil is the purest form of light, symbolic of the Spirit. And so the olive tree was chosen for a lot of reasons. One is that it's long-lived. The other is that it's extremely firmly rooted into the land. And so we're still speaking of the olive, that the roots keep him anchored, steadfast, and nourished, such that he will. What happens if a tree is well nourished and steadfast in the land, and you've got the Netzar and the Choder growing out of it? It's productive. It's productive, abundant fruit, while encouraging productivity in others.
When we were, it's got the last letter, of course, is the Roach, the observant. Wow. It starts with a nun, the descendants, and goes through to observant individual. And gosh, it's very pretty word.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's in fact, the CH is drawn like a fence, and so it speaks of separation. And everything with God is separation. He wants to separate us unto him and separate us from the foibles of man. So it's that separation, which is the single most important decision we can possibly make. And then with those that have been separated under God, he uses that fence to protect them. Mm-hmm. So it's a means of keeping us separate and keeping us protected. And then, so that's the first letter in Choder. And then the T in Choder is drawn with the sense of a basket. The basket was depicted such that which was valuable would be put into that basket. And so that which is valuable to Yah is collected by the Choder and then separated from that which is common behind this fence. And it's all done so in concert with an observant individual, Rosh, that uses their eyes, their minds, and their ears to capitalize on what they're seeing, what they're hearing. So it is a really pretty word, actually. So you've got this Choder stem growing out of the main branch that's being extended through Dowd. We considered a number of possibilities early on when we first confronted it. Here it's written in the perfect conjugation. This reference might be pointing back to the time of Dowd, but that's unlikely since he wasn't named, and when he's being spoken of, he is named, and he is the Shemach, the main branch of the tree. Dowd ain't no lowly Choder. Dowd gives instruction on how to be the Choder. but he is no Choder. Okay. Okay. Alternatively, it could be because this is the prophecy that Christians, because it speaks of the role of the set apart spirit and the Choder's ability to do the job, that Christians want to apply to Jebus. But Jebus was the Passover lamb is not a Choder. The Passover lamb can be considered a Netzar. It's a stem off of the Shemach branch of Dowd, but to demean Yosha with the idea that he is a insignificant stem. I mean, I'm delighted to be an insignificant implement in the hands of Yahweh to do something Yahweh wants to. I mean, that is a tremendous thrill. But come on, Yosha is not a insignificant stem. So he's not the choder either. Because and one of the problems too with applying this to the Christian Jesus is they want him to be immortal, and this was written in the perfect.
Oh, when and done.
The perfect means you're doing this job for a finite period of time. It doesn't say the person's going to live for a finite period, but they're going to do the job of the choder for a finite period of time, which is why it was written in the perfect, not in the imperfect. So this person would be rooted and nourished by that which came forth from Yishay. What came forth from Yishay? Well, Yishay is only named for one reason.
Dowd.
I mean, Yishay's starring role is Samuel says, "Hey, go get your kids. Would you go get your sons and bring them to me?" And there's that conversation in Samuel where Yishay has a talking role. You know, he's there, but his only role. He was Dowd's dad, and we're not sure that Yishay even taught Dowd diddly squat. He had sent Dowd off to be a shepherd in Bethlehem. So there's only one thing associated with Yishay that matters other than his name, which means to stand out and be noticed, drawing attention to the eternal. And that is his son, Dowd.
His youngest son, yeah.
Right, what came from him. So this choder is going to be nourished by that which came forth from Yishay, which means that he's going to feast on Dowd's words. He's going to be noticed for advocating on behalf of Dowd's Mizmor and for the land of Yisrael in which the stump was rooted. This individual would have to be symbolically associated rather than literally connected to what grew from his roots, because both of Dowd's direct descendants that we know of, Solomon and Yosha, could never be considered insignificant or small.
Hardly.
Also potentially telling, because especially in this context, a stump, the olive is the tree most representative of the promised land. Because it is long-lived, firmly rooted, produces olive oil, symbolic of the Spirit, used to anoint the Messiah. When an olive tree ceases to be productive, that's been the case of Yisrael. It has ceased to be productive, and it's cut down or pruned. Do you know, by the way, that in Spain, Italy, and Greece, which are the primary producers of olive oil in the world, that there is a absolute catastrophe in olive orchards, and that the trees are dying at an unprecedented rate, and in fact, most of the old growth olives are dying or dead, and it's just devastating. And across those three countries, where olive oil is a dominant form of the economy, but the olives are dying. Of a parasite at unbelievable numbers. But if a olive tree ceases to be productive, if it's like Israel's, it's cut down or pruned, choder shoots and suckers sprout out of the ground and off of the truncated branch to bring light to the roots of the tree. To enlighten, if you will, the world about what Dowd wrote, to bring a brilliant light to shine on Dowd's words, his Mizmor. And the choder actually rejuvenates that which has been neglected and is unproductive. Yeah, I ended up reading about the way that olives, when they become underproductive, how they become productive. Son of a gun, it's through a choder.
Mm-hmm.
Along these lines, the best time to establish.
That's profound, don't you think?
Oh, I thought it was just, and there's even more to it. The best time to reestablish olive trees from root suckers or stem cuttings, which are both choders, is in September, the time of Towrah and often of Kippurim. The best results come from finding a sprout or sucker that is the size of the most common writing implement in the world, a pencil. While suckers already possess roots, pruning shears should be positioned 8 inches from the end of the shoot, growing from an otherwise unproductive branch. The best results occur when the stem's lower third is dipped into beeswax. The bee is the feminine of debar. It means it's debarah. In Hebrew, debar is the Hebrew word for word. If you want your choder to live, you dip your choder and be productive. You dip your choder into the word. And then you insert it into familiar soil. It's not going to grow unless you put it into familiar soil representing Israel.
Like the Torah.
And then, if you want it to thrive, you have to put a transparent wrapping over it to envelop it, symbolic of the Spirit's protection. For the best results, each choder should be planted such that it absorbs the most amount of light possible. Water and nourish the shoot or the sucker, and from it, new olive trees grow. God's terminology, when it comes to metaphors, he is really good.
He's great, isn't
he? He is really good. When it comes to metaphor, he is. So, from our perspective, it's cool to think of the choders being an insignificant implement or a stem, but it isn't from the perspective of the olive tree. It is, in fact, it is the means that you take an unproductive olive tree and bring it back to life, which is the exact mission of the choder. The choder's mission is to take this neglected olive, where all that exists is the root and the stump, and to bring it back to life, to make it productive again. That's the job. Now, if you recall, in our search for the identity of the choder, it was resolved for us when we discovered that Solomon had a great deal to say about this otherwise insignificant. He did. At the seminal moment in the life of a united Yisrael standing atop Moriah. That's why the olive was steadfastly grounded and thriving in the land. Standing atop Moriah with the most recently completed temple gleaming in the background. The man noted for his wisdom, Solomon, reconciliation Solomon, Dowd's son, delivered the original Sermon on the Mount. He was dedicating the home of the Ark of the Covenant, where an original autograph of the Torah was, along with, right out in front of him, Jacob's descendants, all gathered before him. Speaking of the promises Yahweh had made to his father, Dowd, to guide his people's footsteps, he used a much more descriptive term, a nakri, a foreigner from a distant place and time, speaking a different language, to tell the children of Israel that they would fall away, and that this nakri is someone who would call them back home, and that they should respond to the words this individual would write on their behalf. Therefore, God's not kidding around when it comes to this choder, and we should take this seriously. The choder has the Spirit's support. And if God's going to go to this extent to tell us about what he's trying to achieve and how he is trying to achieve it, it would be irresponsible of us to neglect it just because it's uncomfortable. When we consider how Yahweh is empowering his choder, we witness how an otherwise insignificant implement, a lowly stem off a mighty branch, is emboldened, inspired, and enabled. In the words which follow, we find the fruit of God. We discover what made Dowd not only beloved, but courageous, capable, and comprehensible. Since Dowd David is the exemplar of the covenant as the Son of God, the enabling of the Towrah reveals that the Messiah's words would provide knowledge which lead to understanding. When his flock follows the advice and the path of our shepherd, we are led directly into Yahweh's embrace. Yahweh wants his olive tree to bear fruit once again. The Towrah appears to be a means to that end by tilling the fertile ground that has been left unattended. While this prophecy speaks of a single Towrah, it is designed to share how we can all be Towrahs and flourish, individually and collectively. Just as the Spirit did all of these things for Dowd, our Heavenly Father's beloved Son, the Ruach, as our spiritual mother, is ever ready to settle upon and remain, energize and restore every sheep in his and her flock. Every bit of this applies to all of us. The entire purpose of this Towrah is to encourage all who will listen to Yah's prophets, and especially Dowd's message on behalf of Yehudim, to become fruitful by being grounded and nourished by the one who grew out of the root of his father to become the firstborn Son of God. We can indeed claim the promises Yahweh made to Dowd for ourselves without taking them away from Dowd, but instead by sharing them with him. That is the difference, that's the subtle difference that Christianity missed. That is the difference between life and death. When we embrace all of the promises that were made to Dowd, and we take them and claim them for ourselves, we aren't taking them away from Dowd. We're sharing them with him. That's his intent. That's God's
he wrote
intent.
It for us to do that. Yeah.
That's the only reason he wrote any of this.
Right.
That's the only reason he wrote it. That's the only reason God made a big deal over him, is so we could share all of this with him.
Wow.
He's the exemplar. Just think how simple this is. Dowd equals shepherd. Yosha equals Passover lamb. Who do you want to follow?
Yeah. Let's be real here.
It doesn't work out good for the lamb.
Yeah.
It works out really well to follow the shepherd, though.
Yeah.
The Ruach Spirit did everything which follows for Yahweh's chosen, just as she will do for you and me. Therefore, I read these words as they apply to me, just as you should claim them as they apply to you. Dowd's Shemach branch is exceedingly strong, and it's going to support many thousand of vibrant and fruitful limbs and subsequent stems. This is because, and we're going to go over all of this again next week. I'll just share this with you. We'll call it good night after we've read through this, and we'll analyze it next week. This is because the Spirit of Yahweh will settle and remain on him. The Spirit of providing the capacity to comprehend and teach, and enable understanding by making connections to reveal insights. The Spirit of advice and counsel, and of being emboldened and inspiring. The Spirit of knowing and of knowledge, so as to respect and revere Yahweh. That's a lot, isn't it?
Boy, I guess.
That's the sum total of of everything we desire, everything that we strive to achieve, and it's the means by which we achieve it. Yes, we study Yahweh's words, but these words have been available to tens of billions of people over 3,000 years.
All of this time, yeah.
All of this time.
Mm-hmm.
What's
Somebody
the difference?
should have picked it up. Yeah.
What's the difference? Yahweh has brought his Spirit upon us so that we can perceive these insights and share them, come to know and understand, comprehend, and teach. That's what he has done. That's how he has done it. That's why he has done it.
What an honor.
And there are things we can take pride in. This is one of them. Do you think that Yahweh was proud of Dowd?
Absolutely.
When Dowd started singing the 23rd Mizmor, Yahweh is my shepherd, do you think that God did say, "Hey man, that's my kid.
That's my boy.
That's my kid there.
Yeah.
That's my boy there. God, that's beautiful. I want to get up and sing along."
Oh, yeah.
So God was proud of Dowd.
Of course he was.
So I want to tell you, pride is not a bad thing if your pride is in the right thing.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
we can be proud of this. We ought to be proud of it. It's not our doing, but we certainly made a contribution.
Yeah.
Dowd was benefited from the Spirit coming upon him, and it stayed with him, and it provided the insights, enabled him to be a prophet. But it's not that not like Dowd didn't make a contribution too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what fun would it be for God if the Spirit did everything? Wouldn't that be just like putting a battery in a robot?
Pretty
one of
much.
those little toy robots. Got the wheels and goes kind of forward and backward. The arms goes up and down, makes noise, lights up. I had one of those. You played with it for about 5 minutes and said, "Oh my God, this is really what a waste." This.
All right, I'm bored now.
I'm bored with that now. Yeah. So, but if the robot could make a contribution, and you could, participate with this robot to go explore the universe, and there's nothing more interesting than words, by the way. I mean, exploring planets is going to be fun and all, but there's really nothing more extraordinary to explore than words, and that's what we're doing. And God likes it when we do it together. Yahweh could have liberated his children from Israel without going into the country with a broken down 80-year-old stuttering shepherd.
And an egotistical, loud-mouthed brother.
But he was an egotistical, loud-mouthed brother. But he liked him.
Yeah.
He did. He liked him. He liked working with him.
Yeah.
And so that's God's thing. Moshe was a bit of a rascal. Dowd was really a rascal. The lovable rogue is be a wonderful title for Dowd. God likes such people, and he likes working through people, and so he creates the empowerment so that we can be more than we would otherwise be. That kind of gives God total enjoyment. But we're making a contribution. We're contributing to this. We're not just this thing that sits around and say, "Ooh, that was inspiring. Ooh, inspire me again." No, we get inspired. Like as I said today, I spent most of my day translating the 14th Mashal proverb. I'm reading it as Dowd's instruction manual, and it's like taking Torah Instruction 101 as a freshman in college, and it's just marvelous to learn so that you can apply the lessons.
Mm-hmm.
That's how God works. That's how Dowd prevailed with him, and it's the Spirit that enables us to do this. come to realize, and it's hard to imagine how this would be possible, since we do not claim, and this, by the way, this prophecy will say, we did not receive any new revelation, this is not, we're not prophets, no, because we don't need one. It's all there. But how in the world is it possible that with information that has always been there, that we've come up with probably in the range of 1,000 or more profound and relevant insights that no one has considered in 2,000 or 3,000 years?
Because nobody was looking. Everybody's just like Abraham's brother. They're asleep at the wheel, and it snores.
Yeah, some of these things are just astounding. If you tell people who think they're fairly thoughtful that there are 3 destinations for human souls, and there have to be. God couldn't be just any other way. Yeah, right. Yeah. And there are 3, and the Torah speaks of 3. That you can go and spend your eternity with Yahweh but he has a screening test because he wants to make certain that the right people are there, so it's enjoyable for all those who are there, because eternity is a long time. And there's a consequence for leading people astray, which there has to be justice. But the vast majority of people, they live their mortal lives. They had every opportunity in the world, and if they don't know Yah, then there's no eternal life with Yah, but no eternal punishment. They just simply cease to exist. Totally fair. But no one else has seen the obvious. We talk about the set apart spirit being maternal. She is the maternal aspect of Yah, and yet it is profoundly obvious. There's so many of these insights, like that Pesach is the doorway to Yahweh's home. That Yosha is the Passover lamb, nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah.
That there was no bodily resurrection, that the body of the Passover lamb was destroyed that evening. There are 1,000 of these insights. That Torah doesn't mean law, it means teaching. That Dowd is the Messiah, not Jesus. That Dowd is the Son of God, not Jesus. That Yahweh is pronounced Yahweh based upon Elohah, God, based upon Torah, teaching, guidance, based upon Haya, to exist. It's exceedingly easy to pronounce based upon those words. Let's pronounce it.
Yeah, why not?
Let's declare it. So many profoundly important insights. That the covenant has 5 terms and conditions, and that there are 5 benefits, and that the 5 benefits of the covenant are all provided by the initial 4 mikre, which were all fulfilled in year 4,000 Yah. And that Yah is returning in year 6,000 Yah, which is exactly 40 Yobel after the time that he fulfilled the first 4 mikre. Invitations to be called out and meet. There are 1,000 of these, and they're all profoundly important in our relationship with God. And that God doesn't want us to believe him. He's not interested in faith. He can be known. He proves his existence. That the path to God isn't through believing. It isn't through faith. It isn't through being good. It's through our brains. It's through observing the words that he shared with us, coming to know what he said, understand what he said, respect and accept what he said, and then act upon it, being right. There's so many things that God has shared with us that we have shared. We did the same thing that Dowd did. Yeah, Dowd, Yahweh inspired Dowd to see things that the world hadn't perceived. And the first thing that he did is Wow, that's cool. Allow me to share it.
Hey, y'all, come here, listen to this.
Come here. Yeah, this is marvelous. This is wonderful in our eyes. Come on over. Let's share this. Let's celebrate this. So that is what we're committed to doing. It is the joy of our lives, and the more people who choose to take what Yah said seriously, to listen to him, to understand him, to respond to him, to accept him, to act and engage based upon what he has said, the better. The richer the environment will be in eternity, and particularly with his chosen people. We do this more for Israel than for anyone else. That is, God made a promise to Abraham. He is going to honor it. And so we want to do our utmost to call Yisrael and Yehudim out of religion, out of politics, and back home. Because Yahweh is returning, and he's returning soon. We're the reason we talk about the reaction to the coronavirus is so that people have an understanding that the world is going to change again profoundly, and we need to be ready for it because you don't have a lot of time to get your act together relative to Yahweh. He's returning in 13 years in a number of months, and he's coming back with Dowd. That was the other reason, by the way. There were 4 reasons that Dowd is so important, is because since God is calling his people home, he remains, as he has always been, focused on Yisrael and Yahudah. And because he is calling his people home, his principal troubadour is the most Yehud of all Yehud, Dowd.
No question.
That so many rabbis mock Christians when they say, the second coming is, hey, we'll ask him when the Messiah comes, have you been here before? Well, the answer is yes, but it's not the person that the world has been led to believe.
No.
But it's the person that is the core of what Yisrael is, the person who unified Yisrael and protected Israel, the person that God chose to be the shepherd and king over Israel. He's the one that's returning, the kingdom of Dowd. And even in eternity, God's going to do what he envisioned when he created the universe. He's going to work with us and through us. And that's why it's the kingdom of Dowd for all time. Well, let's return to these what the Spirit will do for us, because each of those words is a treasure. And we will also next week talk about what the Spirit is not doing for us, which is any of those religious things that people think that
think it's the Holy Spirit supposed to do things.
Yeah, it's an entirely different thing. This is all cerebral. Even courage and emboldening is cerebral. You have courage when your mind is right.
Yes.
Real courage, not. So this is all very, very cerebral. God wants to be known, and we get to know him through his word. So I look forward to being with you. Stay healthy, everyone. This is really a time to celebrate and take great comfort in our relationship with Yah. May Yah bless you all. Happy Shabbat. Good night.
Good night, guys.
Good night. Bye.